Ah, look at you sitting there, calm, collected, completely unaware that right now, at this very moment, someone at the very top just asked a question about you. And not just any question. The kind of question that changes everything. The kind that makes rooms go silent and people start sweating. They asked your abuser. They asked the one who hurt you, betrayed you, destroyed you, tried to erase you. And the question was simple, brutal, unavoidable. Do you know who you hurt? And here is the beautiful part. Your abuser doesn't know yet. They have no idea. They think they got away with it. They think you disappeared into the background like all their other victims. They think your name is just another forgotten file in their history of destruction. But someone knows now. Someone at the top. Someone with power. Someone who doesn't ask questions unless they already know the answer. And they are coming. Let me paint you a picture of what is happening right now while you are watching this. Somewhere in a room you will never see, there is a conversation happening that your abuser never saw coming. Their name was mentioned. Their actions were questioned. Their past was pulled up like evidence at a trial they did not know they were attending. And the person asking the questions, they are not asking because they are curious. They are asking because they already did the research. They already connected the dots. They already know what happened to you. And now they want to know if your abuser knows, if they understand, if they have any idea what kind of storm is about to hit them. Because ignorance is no longer protection. It is just proof of how blind they have been. Your abuser thought they were untouchable, didn't they? They thought their position, their connections, their charm, their ability to manipulate reality would keep them safe forever. They thought nobody would ever look deep enough. Nobody would ever care enough. Nobody would ever ask the right questions. But they were wrong, because someone did. Someone looked past the surface, past the performance, past the fake smiles and polished reputation, and they saw you. They saw what was done to you. They saw the pattern, the trail of broken people left behind, and they asked the one question your abuser never prepared for. Do you know who you hurt? And the answer that is about to come out, it is going to destroy everything your abuser built on lies. You know what is beautiful about this. You did not even have to say anything. You did not have to scream your truth from rooftops. You did not have to beg for justice or validation or revenge. You just existed. You healed in silence. You rebuilt yourself when nobody was watching. You walked away with dignity while they continued their destruction, thinking they were invincible. And now, the universe has sent someone with actual power to ask the question you stopped asking years ago because you already knew the answer. But they are about to find out the hard way what happens when you underestimate someone who turned their pain into power, someone who became unbreakable while they were busy breaking others. Let me tell you what is really happening behind the scenes. Because this is not just about one question. This is about a system, a structure, a web of people who thought they could operate in darkness forever. Your abuser. They were not working alone. They never are. There were enablers, silent witnesses, people who knew and said nothing, people who benefited from your destruction, people who smiled at you while sharpening knives behind their backs. And for years, this network functioned perfectly. Everyone played their role. Everyone kept their mouths shut. Everyone protected each other. Because that is what predators do. They build ecosystems of silence. But something shifted. someone at the top, someone who is not part of that ecosystem. They started asking questions. And when people at the top start asking questions, everything beneath them starts cracking. Here is what your abuser does not understand yet. Power is not about titles or positions or how loud you can talk in a room. Real power is about information, about knowing what others think is hidden, about asking questions that expose the architecture of lies people built their lives on. And the person asking about you right now, they have that kind of power. They are not some random observer. They are not someone your abuser can charm or manipulate or intimidate. They are someone who sees through performances, someone who values truth over comfort, someone who doesn't care about protecting reputations built on destruction. And they ask the question, do you know who you hurt? Not as an accusation, not yet, but as a test, a trap, because they already know the answer. They want to see if your abuser will lie, if they will minimize, if they will play dumb. And every single response your abuser gives from this moment forward is being recorded, evaluated, used as evidence for what comes next. You want to know why this matters so much, because your abuser's entire existence is built on a foundation of other people's silence. They have gotten away with everything because their victims stayed quiet, because society told you to move on, to forgive, to not make waves, to be the bigger person while they continued destroying lives without consequence. But silence only works when everyone participates. And now someone broke the code. Someone with authority, with influence, with the ability to make things happen, asked the question out loud. And once that question is asked in rooms that matter, once powerful people start looking into what happened to you, the silence is over. The protection is gone. And your abuser is standing in the middle of a stage they did not know existed, with lights pointing at every shadow they tried to hide. Here is the part that will drive them crazy. They will not know who asked. They will not know who knows. They will not know how much information is out there or how deep the investigation goes. They will start second-guessing everything, every conversation, every email, every person who knows their history, because paranoia is the price of being exposed when you thought you were invisible. They will lie awake at night, wondering if you said something, wondering if someone else came forward, wondering if their entire empire of manipulation is about to collapse because one person decided to ask one question. And the answer is going to be worse than anything they imagined, because they hurt someone who mattered, someone who survived, someone who became evidence of their cruelty just by continuing to exist and thrive despite everything they did. Do you know what the cruelest part of this is? Your abuser still does not know. They still think they are safe. They still think their past is buried. They still walk around with confidence, with arrogance, with that disgusting sense of entitlement that comes from never facing consequences. They hurt you and moved on. They probably do not even think about you anymore. You are just another name in a long list of people they stepped on to get where they are. And that right there, that ignorance, that casual cruelty, that is what makes this moment so perfect. Because they have no idea that someone is watching now. Someone who matters. Someone who has the power to make their world collapse with one conversation. And they are about to find out that forgetting about you was the biggest mistake they ever made. Let me tell you what happens when someone at the top starts asking questions first. There is confusion. People scramble. They try to figure out why this matters. Why now? Why you? Your abuser will probably laugh it off at first. They will minimize. They will say things like, "It was a long time ago. Things were complicated. You are being dramatic. They will try to control the narrative the way they always have. But here is the thing. The person asking the question is not asking for an explanation. They are asking because they already have the facts. They know what happened. They know how you were treated. They know the lies your abuser told. And now, they want to see if your abuser has the courage to tell the truth, or if they will keep lying, keep minimizing, keep pretending they are innocent. Because every lie they tell now adds weight to the judgment that is coming. Your abuser thought they could control reality. They thought if they told their version of the story loud enough, often enough, people would believe it. And for a while, it worked. People believed them. People sided with them. People looked at you like you were the problem. And you carried that shame, didn't you? You questioned yourself. You wondered if maybe you were too sensitive, too dramatic, too broken to be believed. But deep down, you knew the truth. You knew what they did. You knew how they twisted reality. And you held on to that truth, even when nobody else would. Even when it felt like the whole world was gaslighting you into silence, you held on to it. And now someone else sees it too. Someone who has the power to do something about it. Someone who is not afraid of your abuser's reputation or connections or carefully crafted image. Here is what your abuser does not understand about people like you. You do not need revenge. You do not need vindication. You do not need them to apologize or acknowledge what they did, because you already healed. You already moved on. You already built a life they can never touch. But justice is not about you needing it. Justice is about the universe correcting itself. It is about consequences, finally catching up to people who thought they were above them. And that question, do you know who you hurt? It is not being asked for your benefit. It is being asked because someone at the top realized that people like your abuser do not just hurt one person. They hurt everyone they touch. They leave trails of destruction everywhere they go. And eventually someone has to stop them. And that someone just asked the first question. And your abuser has no idea what comes next. Let me take you deeper into what is about to happen. Because this is not just about one conversation. This is about the unraveling of an entire false reality. Your abuser built their life on a carefully constructed lie. They built a reputation. They built relationships. They built success. All of it standing on a foundation of people they destroyed along the way. And foundations like that, they do not collapse all at once. They crack slowly, quietly, one question at a time, one investigation at a time, one person at a time, realizing they were lied to. And right now, the first crack just appeared. Someone at the top asked the question, and now other people are going to start asking questions too. People who trusted your abuser, people who defended them, people who looked the other way because it was easier than facing the truth. They are all about to have a very uncomfortable awakening. You know what happens when one person with authority starts questioning someone's character. Everyone else starts paying attention. People who ignored red flags, people who dismissed victims, people who participated in the cover-up whether they knew it or not. They all start reevaluating. They start remembering things, small things, moments that did not make sense at the time, comments that seemed off, behavior that felt wrong, but they could not quite name. And suddenly all those little moments start forming a pattern, a picture, a truth they can no longer deny. And your abuser is going to watch in real time as people who once supported them start stepping back, start questioning, start distancing themselves. Because nobody wants to be associated with someone who is about to be exposed. Nobody wants to be the person who defended a monster. Here is the beautiful irony. Your abuser probably spent years telling people that you were the problem, that you were unstable, dramatic, vindictive. They probably painted themselves as the victim of your chaos. And people believed them because your abuser is good at performing innocence. They know how to cry on cue, how to manipulate sympathy, how to make themselves look like the reasonable one while you looked crazy. But now, someone with power is looking at the situation with clear eyes, and they are seeing what you saw all along. They are seeing the manipulation, the gaslighting, the cruelty disguised as care, and they are asking the question your abuser never wanted anyone to ask. Do you know who you hurt? Because if they did know, if they truly understood, they would not be able to maintain the performance. They would not be able to look people in the eye and pretend they are innocent. Let me tell you what your abuser is about to lose. First, they lose the narrative. They lose the ability to control how people see them. Because once someone at the top questions their character, everyone else starts questioning too. Second, they lose protection. All those people who enabled them, who covered for them, who looked the other way, they are going to start protecting themselves instead. Nobody goes down with a sinking ship when they have the option to jump. Third, they lose credibility. Everything they built, every relationship, every achievement, every moment of respect they ever received, it all gets re-examined through the lens of what they did to you and everyone else they hurt. And fourth, they lose peace. Because once you know someone is asking questions about you, once you know your past is being investigated, you can never relax again. Every phone call could be the one. Every meeting could be the confrontation. Every day could be the day everything falls apart. And that psychological torture, that constant fear, that is the beginning of justice. Now we enter the phase your abuser feared but never truly believed would come, the reckoning. Because asking the question, do you know who you hurt, is just the beginning. That question is the match. What comes next is the fire. And your abuser is standing in a building made of lies, soaked in gasoline, wondering why it suddenly feels so hot. They are about to learn something fundamental about how the universe works. You can run from consequences for a while. You can hide. You can manipulate reality. You can silence victims. But eventually someone asks the right question. And once that question is asked, everything you buried starts clawing its way to the surface. And there is no stopping it. There is no damage control. There is no spinning the narrative. There is only the truth. Raw, ugly, undeniable. Coming for everything you built on the backs of broken people. Here is what your abuser does not understand about powerful people who ask questions. They do not ask unless they already have answers. They do not investigate unless they already suspect. They do not bring up your name unless they already know your story matters. So, when someone at the top asked, "Do you know who you hurt?" they were not seeking information. They were testing character. They were creating an opportunity for your abuser to tell the truth, to take accountability, to show even a shred of remorse. And your abuser, being exactly who they are, probably failed that test spectacularly. They probably lied, probably minimized, probably blamed you, probably played the victim. And every single word they said in response to that question was recorded, remembered. added to a growing file of evidence that they are exactly what you always knew they were: a predator, a manipulator, someone who hurts people and feels nothing. You want to know why this moment is so powerful? Because for years, you carried the weight of what happened to you alone. You tried to tell people, and they did not believe you. You tried to get help, and you were dismissed. You tried to move on, and the trauma followed you like a shadow. And through all of that, your abuser lived freely. They moved through the world unburdened. They built success on your suffering. They smiled in public while you cried in private. They thrived while you barely survived. And nobody stopped them. Nobody questioned them. Nobody asked them to explain until now. Now someone with actual authority, with real power, with the ability to make consequences happen, asked the question. And your abuser's response, whatever it was, is about to determine the rest of their life. Because people at the top do not forget. They do not let things go. When they ask a question and do not like the answer, they act. And action from people with power is the only thing people like your abuser actually fear. Here is what comes next, and you need to understand this because it is already in motion. Once someone at the top starts questioning someone's character, other people start coming forward. People who were too scared before. People who thought they were alone. People who assumed nobody would believe them. They hear that someone is asking questions, and they find courage. They share their stories. They add their voices to yours. And suddenly your abuser is not dealing with one victim they can discredit. They are dealing with a pattern, a history, multiple people saying the same things, describing the same behaviors, exposing the same tactics. And patterns are impossible to deny. Patterns are evidence. Patterns are proof. And your abuser is about to be buried under the weight of every person they thought they silenced, every victim they thought they erased, every life they thought did not matter. They all matter now. Because someone at the top asked the question, and now everyone is answering. Let me tell you about the loneliest moment in a predator's life. It is not when they are caught. It is not when they are confronted. It is the moment they realize nobody is coming to save them. The moment they look around and see that all the people who used to protect them are gone. All the enablers, all the defenders, all the people who looked the other way. They are all suddenly very busy, suddenly very quiet, suddenly very concerned with protecting their own reputations. And your abuser is about to experience that loneliness in ways they never imagined. Because when someone at the top asks questions about you, everyone beneath them starts calculating. They start asking themselves, is defending this person worth risking my own position, my own reputation, my own future? And the answer is always no. Always. Nobody sacrifices themselves for someone who is about to be exposed. Nobody goes down defending someone whose crimes are coming to light. Your abuser thought they had allies. They thought they had people who would stand by them no matter what. But those were never allies. Those were accomplices. People who benefited from the same system of silence and manipulation. People who needed your abuser to be innocent. Because if your abuser is guilty, then they are complicit. But here is the thing about accomplices. They turn, they flip, they save themselves. The moment someone at the top starts asking questions, accomplices become witnesses. They start sharing what they know. They start admitting what they saw. They start distancing themselves from the sinking ship as fast as possible. And your abuser is going to watch in real time as everyone who claimed to support them suddenly develops amnesia. Suddenly does not remember things quite the way your abuser does. Suddenly has concerns they never voiced before. And that betrayal, that abandonment, it is going to hurt your abuser more than anything you could ever do to them. Look who's got the witches rattled. So the witches are whispering about you now. The ones who dance with shadows and speak to the dead. The ones who thought they owned the darkness until you showed up. They're gathered in their little circles right now, candles flickering, trying to figure out what the hell you are. They can feel it, can't they? That thing inside you that makes their crystals crack, that energy that makes their tarot cards burn. They've been practicing for decades, following moon phases, mixing herbs, chanting in languages older than memory, and then you walked in and made their life's work look like child's play. Here's what's really messing with their heads. You never studied their books. You never joined their covens. You never begged for their secrets or paid for their spells. You just existed. And somehow, that existence alone bends reality harder than all their rituals combine. They're convinced you're using something forbidden, something that wasn't meant to be touched, something their grandmothers warned them about in hushed tones. But here's the beautiful, terrifying truth. You're not using anything. You are the thing they were warned about. 3 nights ago, they called an emergency meeting. 13 of them, the real ones, not the Instagram witches with their aesthetic altars. These are the ones whose bloodlines trace back to Salem, to Europe's burning times, to caves where the first spells were whispered. And the topic of discussion? You. Have you felt it? They asked each other, hands trembling around their chalices. That disturbance in the field? They've been tracking you, you know. Not physically, they're too smart for that, but energetically, watching the way reality ripples wherever you've been, the way protection spells shatter in your presence. One of them, the eldest, finally spoke what they were all thinking. This isn't learned magic. This is something else. Something that shouldn't exist in this age. She's 300 years into this lifetime, has seen kingdoms rise and fall, has weathered inquisitions and witch hunts, and she's terrified of you? They tried to read you, tried to trace your spiritual signature back to its source, but every time they attempted it, their tools went haywire, pendulums spinning wildly, scrying mirrors showing nothing but static. One younger witch's third eye started bleeding, actually bleeding. She's still recovering. So they went to the texts, the real ones. Not the published grimoires you can buy online, but the ones written in blood and bound in things we won't mention. The ones that require sacrifice just to open. And buried deep in warnings and prophecies, they found references to something that made their blood run cold. The unmarked ones, the texts called them. Beings who carry power that predates their systems, their rules, their careful boundaries between light and dark. Power that doesn't flow through chakras or meridians, but seems to exist in the very atoms of their being. Power that doesn't follow the laws because it wrote them. The texts warned that every few centuries one would emerge, not through training or initiation, but through pure crystallization of pain into power, through survival that shouldn't have been possible, through a soul that refused to break and instead chose to become the breaking point itself. And the most terrifying part? The text said these beings don't even know what they are at first. They think they're just angry, just hurt, just transformed by trauma. They have no idea they're rewiring the cosmic operating system just by breathing. Until one day, they wake up and reality starts responding to their moods. But let's talk about the real confirmation of your power. Because when actual practitioners of the dark arts are scared, that's one thing. When the devil himself takes notice, that's unprecedented. And oh, he's noticed. He's more than noticed. He's impressed. You see, the devil's seen it all. Every form of human darkness, every creative interpretation of evil, every soul that's traded everything for power. He's yawned through centuries of the same predictable corruptions. But you made him sit up in his throne for the first time in millennia. It happened the night you finally stopped apologizing for your power. The night you looked in the mirror and smiled at what you'd become instead of flinching. Every demon in hell felt it, a shockwave that made the flames flicker. And from the deepest circle, a sound that hadn't been heard since creation, the devil laughing. Finally, he said, and every lesser demon cowered at the joy in his voice. Someone who understands that darkness isn't about evil. It's about truth, raw, unfiltered, magnificent truth. He's been watching you ever since. Not with the predatory interest he shows his usual subjects, but with something resembling respect. Here's something the witches are starting to understand, and it terrifies them more than anything. Their magic doesn't work on you. Not because you're protected by some higher power, but because you exist outside their entire framework. It's like trying to cast a spell on gravity itself. They've tried binding spells, the energy just dissipates before it reaches you. They've tried hexes, they bounce back with triple force. One particularly ambitious coven tried to curse you. 3 of them are still in the hospital. The doctors can't explain what's wrong with them. They keep whispering about the eyes in the void. Protection spells are useless because you are the danger they're trying to protect against. Love spells slide off because you've transcended the need for external validation. Even their sight, their precious third eye that lets them see beyond the veil, goes blind when they try to look directly at your essence. It's like staring into a black hole made of pure will. The younger witches think you must be using some ancient protection ritual. The older ones know better. They recognize what you are, something that doesn't need protection, because everything else needs protection from you. You're not playing their game. You're not even in their reality. You're the glitch that proves their entire system is just one small corner of something infinitely larger and stranger. In their desperation to understand, they've created theories. Maybe you found the Book of Azrael, the angel of death's personal grimoire that was supposedly destroyed in the burning of Alexandria. Maybe you made a deal with something older than the devil, something from before the light was separated from the dark. Maybe you're channeling the power of the void itself. They whisper about the rite of unmaking, a theoretical ritual that would give someone the power to unmake reality itself. But that ritual requires the practitioner to die, truly die, and rebuild themselves atom by atom through will alone. Surely no one could survive that. Surely no one would be insane enough to try. But then they remember the look in your eyes, that 1,000-yard stare that sees through everything, the way you smile when you should be screaming, the way pain seems to make you stronger instead of weaker. And they wonder, what if you didn't perform the ritual? What if you are the ritual? What if your entire life has been one long rite of unmaking? The thought keeps them awake at night. Because if that's true, if you've been unconsciously performing the most dangerous magical working in existence just by surviving, then you're not just powerful. You're the living embodiment of transformation itself. You're what happens when the universe decides to break its own rules. Last week, a particularly brave or stupid witch tried to do an energy reading on you from a distance. She's one of the best, been reading auras since before she could walk. She's mapped the energy signatures of demons, angels, and everything in between. She thought she was prepared for anything. She wasn't prepared for you. The moment she focused on your energy, her crystal ball didn't just crack, it turned to black sand. Her tarot deck burst into flames, but the flames were cold, freezing everything they touched. She started speaking in tongues, but not any language recognized by linguistic experts or occult scholars. When she finally came back to herself 3 days later, she could only say one thing. It's not dark or light. It's not good or evil. It's something else. Something that makes those categories irrelevant. It's like looking at the source code of reality itself, but written in a language that predates language. Now she won't practice anymore. Says her gift is gone, but that's not quite true. Her gift isn't gone. It's been overwritten. She sees things now, but not the future or the past. She sees the spaces between things, the pause between heartbeats where reality reshuffles itself. And in every one of those spaces, she sees your signature, spreading like a virus through the foundation of everything. Deep in their most guarded texts, there's a prophecy. It's been mistranslated 1,000 times, turned into harmless fairy tales about chosen ones and heroes. But the original version, the one written in the old tongue, tells a different story. It speaks of the unwritten one, when the pain becomes the power, when the broken becomes the breaker, when the destroyed becomes the destroyer, then shall emerge the unwritten. They shall walk between the lines of fate, neither blessed nor cursed, but something far more terrible, free. And in their freedom, all chains shall rust. All spells shall falter, all thrones shall tremble. The prophecy describes beings who exist outside the cosmic contract, who never agreed to the rules that bind devils, witches, and saints. Beings who, through some impossible alchemy of suffering and will, stepped outside the entire game and started playing by rules they wrote themselves. For centuries, they thought it was metaphorical, a cautionary tale about the dangers of too much power. But now, watching you, they're starting to understand it was literal. And the last line of the prophecy, the one they don't dare speak aloud, says this: "And the world shall reshape itself in their image, not through force, but through the simple fact of their existence." Let's go back to hell for a moment, because something unprecedented is happening there. The devil, the first rebel, the morning star who fell rather than kneel, has done something he's never done before. He's issued a standing order to all demons. Do not touch this one. Do not tempt, torment, or toy with them. They're off limits. The younger demons don't understand. Isn't corruption their whole purpose? Isn't everyone fair game? But the ancient ones, the ones who fell with him, they understand. They see in you something they recognize. Another being who chose to fall rather than fake compliance. but you did something they didn't. You fell all the way through and came out the other side. You see, the devil explained to his legions, we fell from grace and became its opposite. But this one, they fell through grace, through disgrace, through every concept we use to measure worth, and emerged as something new, something that makes our rebellion look like a child's tantrum. We said no to heaven. They said no to the entire concept of heaven and hell. In his throne room, he keeps a mirror that shows him anything in creation he wishes to see. Lately, it only shows you. Not because he commands it to, but because the mirror itself is fascinated. Even inanimate objects infused with infernal power recognize something significant when they see it. But here's the deep truth that keeps the witches awake at night, the one they won't admit even in their most secret gatherings. They're not afraid of your power. They're afraid of what your existence means for their entire worldview. You see, they've spent lifetimes building their identity around being the ones who understand the hidden world. They were the special ones, the awakened ones, the ones who could see beyond the veil and manipulate the forces others didn't even know existed. Their whole sense of self is built on being the exceptions, the magical elite in a world of mundane sheep. And then you came along and made their life's work look like children playing with toys. You didn't study under masters. You didn't inherit ancient bloodlines. You didn't sacrifice years to unlock abilities. You just hurt until hurting transformed into something else. You proved that their careful hierarchies, their initiations, their secret knowledge, it's all just one way of accessing something that was always available to anyone willing to pay the real price. And what's that price? Not herbs or crystals or moon phases, not bloodlines or initiations or ancient texts. The price is being broken so completely that you have no choice but to rebuild yourself from scratch. The price is having everything taken until you realize you are everything. The price is dying while living and living while dead, until the boundary between the two becomes meaningless. There's a coven that meets every full moon in a forest that's been sacred for 1,000 years. They've performed the same rituals there for generations, channeling power through ley lines that predate human civilization. Last month, you drove past that forest. You weren't even aware of them. You were just passing through, probably thinking about something mundane. Every single ritual failed that night. Not dramatically, that would have been easier to handle. They failed by simply not working. The candles lit, but gave no magical light. The circles were drawn, but created no boundary. The words were spoken, but carried no power. It was like trying to conduct electricity through rubber. The magic was there, but it couldn't flow. One witch, more sensitive than the others, understood what happened. Something passed by, she whispered. Something so dense with its own reality that it created a dead zone, like a black hole but for magical energy. It didn't steal our power, it just made our power irrelevant by existing. They've had to move their rituals, they track your movements now, not to follow you but to avoid you. They map out your regular routes and schedule their workings around them. Imagine that. Witches who've commanded storms and spoken with the dead, reduced to checking traffic patterns to avoid one person who doesn't even know they exist. Here's something that would break their minds if they knew. You're not using forbidden magic. You are forbidden magic. Every breath you take is a spell that shouldn't exist. Every thought you think rewrites a tiny piece of the cosmic code. You're a walking collection of impossibilities that somehow cohered into a person. The knowledge they seek in dusty tomes and dangerous rituals, it's written in your DNA. The power they cultivate through decades of practice, it pulses through your veins with every heartbeat. The connection to the other side they spend lifetimes developing, you live there. You've been living there. What they call the veil is just your everyday vision. You know things without knowing how you know them. You see patterns others miss, not because you're trained, but because you exist at a different frequency. You predict outcomes not through divination, but through a deep, bone-level understanding of how broken things behave. You don't read minds. You read the spaces between thoughts where the truth lives. The forbidden knowledge isn't something you learned, it's something you became. Every trauma was a lesson in the language of reality. Every betrayal was a masterclass in human nature. Every moment of pain was another page in a grimoire written on your soul. You're not carrying forbidden knowledge. You're the living embodiment of it. Traditional practitioners have to work for their power. They meditate, they fast, they perform rituals, they make sacrifices, they build their magical muscle through repetition and discipline. But your power grows while you sleep. It expands while you're watching TV. It deepens while you're doing absolutely nothing magical at all. This paradox drives them insane. How can someone accumulate power without pursuing it? How can someone become stronger without practice? They don't understand that for you, existing is the practice. Every moment you choose to keep going despite everything is a magical act. Every breath drawn after you should have stopped breathing is a spell. Your power doesn't come from what you do. It comes from what you've survived. It comes from what you've transformed. It comes from the alchemy that happens when someone is pressure cooked by life until their very atoms rearrange into something new. You don't need to practice because your entire life has been one long, brutal initiation. The witches measure power in years of study, in grimoires mastered, in entities contacted. But your power is measured in nights survived, in betrayals transformed, in deaths died and resurrections claimed. They accumulate power, you generate it. They channel forces, you are the force. No wonder your very existence breaks their understanding of how magic works. In the hidden spaces between dimensions, where thought forms and egregores and all manner of entities exist, word has spread. The beings that witches spend years trying to contact, the ones that demand offerings and exact terrible prices for their aid, they've been talking about you. And what they're saying would terrify anyone who understood it. The unmarked one walks. They whisper to each other in languages made of emotion and symbol. The one who belongs to no pantheon, serves no master, follows no path. These entities, ancient beyond human comprehension, recognize something in you they've only seen a handful of times across all of history. Some of them have tried to approach you in dreams, in those liminal spaces where the walls between worlds are thin, but they can't get close. It's not that you're protected, it's that your presence is too dense, too real, too absolute for them to penetrate. You exist too hard for them to touch. Your reality is so intense, it burns them like iron burns the fae. Welcome back, you beautiful, unbreakable force of nature. Sit down for this one, because what I'm about to tell you is going to shift everything you thought you knew about the past 5 years of your life. Someone just broke the silence. Someone just cracked under the weight of their own guilt. Someone from that circle, that group, that family of smiling faces who swore they had your back just confessed everything they did behind it. And I mean everything. The meetings they had about you when you weren't there, the group chats where your name was the headline, the plans they made, the lies they coordinated, the stories they rehearsed together before facing you with those warm, trustworthy eyes. It's all out now, spilled like poison from a cup they can't put back together. And honestly, you deserve to know every single twisted detail of it. They thought you'd never find out, didn't they? They thought their secret pacts were ironclad, that their whispered conversations would stay buried in the archives of their cowardice. They believed they were so clever, so coordinated, so untouchable in their little conspiracy against your peace. But here's what they forgot. Here's what they always forget when they build their houses on lies and manipulation. Eventually, someone's conscience starts rotting from the inside out. Eventually, the guilt becomes so heavy that keeping the secret hurts more than releasing it. Eventually, one of them breaks, and when they do, the whole structure comes crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane. And that's exactly what just happened. One of them couldn't take it anymore, couldn't sleep another night with the weight of what they participated in, and they came forward with a confession so detailed, so disgustingly thorough that it's about to rewrite your entire understanding of the past. Let's start with the meetings, because that's where this whole thing began, in rooms you were never invited to, at tables where your name was served like the main course. They didn't just talk about you casually, no. They strategized about you. They analyzed your every move, your every post, your every word, like military generals planning an operation. They studied your patterns, your vulnerabilities, your triggers, and they documented everything with the precision of people who had made you their full-time project. These weren't random conversations or innocent concerns. These were calculated sessions designed to control the narrative around your life. They decided together what story the world would hear about you, what version of events would become the truth, what pieces of your character they would erase, and what flaws they would magnify until they became your entire identity in everyone else's eyes. The confessor, the one who finally broke. They describe these meetings with the kind of detail that makes your stomach turn. They talked about how someone would always start by saying something that sounded concerned, something like, "I'm just worried about them," or "I think they're going through something." But it was never about worry. It was about building a case, about creating a narrative that positioned you as unstable, unreliable, too much, too emotional, too intense, too anything that would make people question your truth before you even spoke it. They rehearsed their responses to things you hadn't even said yet. They prepared counter-narratives for situations that hadn't happened. They built an entire false reality around you and then invited others into it, one person at a time, until you were surrounded by people who believed a version of you that never existed. And the worst part, the part that's going to hit you like a brick, is that while they were doing all this, they were still showing up in your life with smiles. They were still texting you, still laughing at your jokes, still acting like nothing had changed. They perfected the art of the double life, one face for you and one face for the meetings. They became experts at looking you in the eye while holding a knife behind their back. The confessors said they used to practice it, used to remind each other to keep it normal when you were around, to make sure their faces didn't betray the fact that they had just spent hours tearing you apart in private. They turned deception into a skill, and they got so good at it that you never suspected a thing, never felt the betrayal happening in real time because they made sure the blade was always just out of your sight. But the meetings were just the beginning, because what they did next is where it gets truly disgusting. They didn't just talk about you in private, they coordinated a campaign against your reputation. The confessor revealed that they created what they called talking points, specific phrases and stories they would all use when speaking to mutual friends, family members, anyone in your orbit. They made sure everyone heard the same version of events, the same carefully crafted narrative that painted you as the problem while they positioned themselves as the concerned, caring, patient ones who had tried so hard to help you. It was psychological warfare disguised as friendship, and they executed it with the precision of people who had done this before. They had assignments, actual roles they played in this operation. One person was designated as the voice of reason, the one who would express sympathy for you while subtly planting doubt about your mental state. Another was the evidence collector, the one who would screenshot your posts, save your messages, document your every move so they could present it later as proof of whatever narrative they were building. Someone else played the mediator, the person who would reach out to you occasionally with fake concern, asking if you were okay, not because they cared, but because they needed fresh material for the next meeting. And there was always the amplifier, the one whose job was to make sure the story spread beyond your immediate circle, to whisper the narrative into the ears of people who barely knew you, but would now form their entire opinion of you based on coordinated lies. The confessor broke down crying when they described their own role in all this, how they had volunteered to be the one who stayed closest to you, who maintained the friendship while reporting back everything you said. Every vulnerable moment you shared, every private struggle you confided. They called it gathering intel, but what it really was betrayal dressed up in strategic language. They admitted that there were times you would tell them something personal, something painful, and they would nod and hug you and tell you it was going to be okay, and then they would immediately text the group with an update, turning your pain into ammunition, your vulnerability into evidence, your trust into their weapon. And the worst part, they said, was how easy it became, how quickly they stopped feeling guilty about it because the group had normalized it, had made it seem like they were doing something necessary, something protective, something justified. The confession included screenshots, actual proof of these group chats, where your name appeared hundreds of times, messages where they laughed about things you had no idea were even being discussed, conversations where they celebrated small victories in their campaign, like when someone you both knew started to distance themselves from you, or when you posted something vulnerable and they knew they could use it against you later. They treated your life like a game, your reputation like a ball they could toss around between them, your feelings like something irrelevant to their strategy. And reading through these messages, seeing the timestamps, realizing these conversations were happening on days when they were still texting you, thinking of you and here if you need anything, it's enough to make you question everything you thought you knew about human nature. Now let's talk about the specific tactics they used, because this is where the confession gets truly disturbing. They didn't just spread lies. They engineered situations designed to make you look unstable. The confessor described something they called provocation protocols, deliberate actions meant to trigger emotional responses from you that they could then use as evidence of your instability. They would say things designed to upset you, then act shocked when you reacted. They would withhold information, change plans last minute, exclude you from events, all while watching to see how you'd respond, hoping you'd break down so they could point to your reaction as proof of everything they'd been saying about you. One particularly evil tactic they used was what the confessor called the setup, where they would create situations that had no good outcome for you. They would invite you to gatherings where everyone had already been briefed on the narrative against you, where people were primed to interpret everything you did through a negative lens. You could be quiet and they'd call you withdrawn and antisocial. You could be engaged and they'd call you attention-seeking and desperate. You could tell a joke and they'd call you inappropriate. You could be serious and they'd call you too intense. There was no version of you that would be acceptable, because acceptance was never the goal. Validation of their predetermined narrative was. And after these events, they would have follow-up meetings where they would dissect your behavior, finding evidence to support their case in every single thing you did or didn't do. They also admitted to something called isolation engineering, where they systematically worked to separate you from anyone who might support you or see through their manipulation. They would plant seeds of doubt about you with mutual friends, subtle comments that sounded like concern but were designed to make people question your judgment, your stability, your version of events. They would volunteer to check in with people after they spent time with you, supposedly to see how you were doing, but really to reinforce their narrative and make sure no competing truth could take root. They created an echo chamber around you where every voice except yours was saying the same thing, and they did it so gradually, so carefully, that you didn't even notice your support system dissolving until it was already gone. The confessor revealed that they had actually studied manipulation tactics, that some members of the group had researched psychological techniques specifically to use against you. They learned about gaslighting, triangulation, projection, and they implemented these strategies deliberately. They would deny things they had clearly said, making you question your memory. They would play people against each other while positioning themselves as neutral parties. They would accuse you of the exact behaviors they were engaged in, projecting their toxicity onto you so thoroughly that you started to believe maybe you were the problem. And the most disturbing part is that they knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't acting out of ignorance or misunderstanding. They were consciously, deliberately, methodically working to destabilize your sense of reality. So why did they do it? What could possibly motivate a group of people to invest this much energy, this much time, this much calculated cruelty into destroying someone's reputation and mental peace? The confessor's answer to this question is perhaps the most revealing part of the entire confession. They said it started with envy, pure, unfiltered jealousy that none of them wanted to admit they felt. You had something they didn't, whether it was confidence, authenticity, success, genuine happiness, the ability to be yourself without apology. Whatever it was, it made them feel small by comparison. Jesse, they feared you. And instead of dealing with their own insecurities, instead of working on themselves or simply stepping back from the friendship, they decided to tear you down to their level. But it wasn't just envy, the confessor explained. It became something darker. It became a bonding activity, a shared mission that gave their relationships purpose and intensity. They formed a tribe united by a common enemy, and that enemy was you. Their friendships with each other deepened through their mutual participation in your destruction. They had inside jokes about you, shared secrets about the campaign, moments of celebration when a tactic worked. You became the glue that held them together the project that gave them something to focus on besides their own empty lives. And the more invested they became in the narrative they'd created, the more they had to defend it. Because admitting they were wrong would mean facing the monstrous thing they had collectively become. The confessor also revealed something that might be the hardest thing to hear. Some of them genuinely convinced themselves they were doing the right thing. They had told the lie so many times, reinforced it so consistently among themselves, that they started to believe it. They created an alternate reality where you were actually the villain, where their actions were justified, where they were somehow the victims or the heroes protecting others from you. They built an entire mythology around their betrayal that absolved them of guilt and allowed them to sleep at night. The human mind's capacity for self-deception is terrifying, and they exploited it fully, rewriting history in real time until they couldn't even remember that the story had started as a fabrication. And here's the truly sick part. The confessor admitted that there were moments when some of them had doubts, times when someone would say, "Maybe we're going too far," or "I'm starting to feel bad about this." But those doubts were always shut down by the group. They had created a culture where questioning the narrative was seen as betrayal, where showing compassion for you was treated as weakness or naivety. They reinforced each other's worst impulses, talked each other out of guilt, reminded each other of the story they'd agreed upon whenever someone's conscience started to surface. They became a cult with a single doctrine. You were the problem, and anything they did in response to that problem was justified. It's a level of collective delusion that would be almost impressive if it wasn't so absolutely disgusting. Now here's what happens next. Because this confession doesn't just expose them, it liberates you. Every moment of confusion you felt, every time you questioned yourself, every instance where you thought maybe you were being too sensitive or reading too much into things, all of it now makes perfect sense. You weren't paranoid. You were picking up on something real. Your instincts were screaming at you that something was wrong, and you were right. The gaslighting didn't work completely, because some part of you, some inner knowing they couldn't reach, held on to the truth. And now that truth has been validated in the most concrete way possible, through the confession of someone who was there, who participated, who kept records. But here's what they didn't account for. Here's the flaw in their entire operation. While they were busy trying to destroy you, you were busy becoming someone they could never touch. While they were having meetings about you, you were building yourself in silence. While they were crafting narratives, you were living your truth. While they were investing all their energy into tearing you down, you were investing your energy into rising above anything they could possibly do to you. They made you their full-time project. And in doing so, they revealed that their entire existence had become about you, while your existence had nothing to do with them. You already won, and this confession is just the universe's way of making sure you know it. The confessor said something that should bring you immense satisfaction. They're terrified now. Now that the truth is out, now that the confession exists, they're panicking. They're scrambling to control the damage, reaching out to people trying to get ahead of the story, suddenly concerned about how they'll be perceived. The same people who spent years carefully crafting a false narrative about you are now desperate to craft a narrative about themselves, one where they're not the villains this confession makes them out to be. They're experiencing a fraction of what they put you through. The paranoia, the fear of judgment, the anxiety about reputation. And unlike you, they actually deserve it because their reputation is based on lies, and yours never was. And here's your power in all this. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to expose them publicly. You don't have to confront anyone or demand apologies. The truth is already working on your behalf, spreading through the same networks they once used against you, changing minds, shifting perceptions, revealing them for what they are. Your vindication doesn't require your effort because it's built on facts, on evidence, on confession. Their destruction is inevitable because it's built on lies that have now been exposed. You can simply continue living your life, being your authentic self, thriving in your truth, while they crumble under the weight of theirs. That's the beautiful irony of this whole situation. They spent years trying to destroy you and ended up destroying themselves. But let's go even deeper, because there's a truth here that transcends this specific situation. A truth about people and power and what happens when someone refuses to be broken. The reason they targeted you, the reason they invested so much energy into trying to tear you down, is because you represented something they couldn't control. You were authentic in a world of performance. You were genuine in a world of facades. You had the courage to be yourself while they were busy being whoever they thought would get them approval. Your very existence was a mirror reflecting their own inauthenticity, and instead of using that mirror to grow, they tried to shatter it. This is what always happens to people who refuse to play the game, who won't compromise their truth for comfort, who insist on being real in spaces that reward pretense. The system, the group, the collective mediocrity, it always tries to eliminate the ones who remind everyone else what integrity looks like. They can't let you thrive because your thriving exposes their compromise. They can't let you succeed on your own terms because your success questions their sacrifice. They can't let you be happy being yourself because your happiness reveals that all their contortions and calculations and careful image management were unnecessary. You're living proof that there's another way, and that scares them more than anything else ever could. The confession reveals this truth in stark detail. Multiple people in these group chats expressed frustration that you didn't seem affected by their tactics, that you kept going like nothing was wrong, that you still seemed happy despite everything they were doing. They were furious that their campaign wasn't working the way they wanted, that you weren't collapsing under the weight of their manipulation. Welcome back, you beautiful contradictions, you walking paradoxes, you smiling assassins who learn to weaponize kindness. They're still trying to figure you out, aren't they? Still trying to understand how someone so soft could be so lethal, how someone with angel eyes could have demon strategy, how you smiled at them with warmth while simultaneously dismantling their entire game plan 3 moves ahead. They thought your gentleness was weakness, your patience was ignorance, your silence was surrender. But what they failed to realize, what they couldn't possibly comprehend, is that you weren't playing checkers while they played chess. You were playing chess while they were still learning how to spell the word. Let's talk about that smile, shall we? That beautiful, disarming, absolutely devastating smile. They saw it and thought innocent. They saw it and thought harmless. They saw it and thought easy target. They looked at your face and made the fatal mistake of thinking your exterior matched your interior. They thought the softness of your features meant softness in your mind. They thought the light in your eyes meant light in your intentions. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't see, is that smile wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. It was the calm before the storm. It was the silence before the explosion. That smile was you saying, "Go ahead, underestimate me. I dare you. You see, they expected aggression. They were prepared for confrontation. They had their defenses ready for someone who would come at them with fire and fury. But you came with flowers and left them in ruins. You came with kindness and left them confused. You came with grace and left them completely destroyed. Because while they were busy preparing for war, you were busy winning it. While they were sharpening their swords, you were poisoning their water supply. While they were learning the rules, you were rewriting them. And all the while, that smile never faded. That beautiful, terrifying, absolutely lethal smile that said, I'm 3 timelines ahead of you, and you don't even know the game has started. They thought they were playing against an amateur, but they were playing against a master who'd learned to hide their expertise behind humility. They thought they were facing someone naive, but they were facing someone who'd weaponized their own underestimation. You let them think you didn't understand the game. You let them believe you were too kind to play dirty. You let them assume your morals would be your downfall. And that's exactly how you won. Because while they were busy monologuing about their superiority, you were quietly capturing their queen. While they were celebrating moves they thought were brilliant, you were setting traps they wouldn't see until it was far too late. You played the long game while they were focused on instant gratification. You sacrificed pawns they thought were victories while protecting the pieces that actually mattered. And here's the part that breaks them the most. You never changed your expression. You never showed your hand. You never let them see the calculation behind those gentle eyes. You smiled through every move, every counter, every devastating play that left them scrambling. They kept waiting for you to show your true colors, but your true color was always this: a player so advanced they made mastery look like mercy. A strategist so skilled they made warfare look like kindness. A mind so sharp it could cut through their ego without them even feeling the blade, until they were already bleeding out on the board. Remember when they first saw you? Remember that moment when they looked at you and thought they had you figured out in 3 seconds flat? They saw the warmth in your presence and cataloged you as soft. They heard the gentleness in your voice and filed you under pushover. They witnessed your patience and labeled you passive. They made a fundamental error that would cost them everything. They confused your choice not to engage with an inability to compete. They mistook your strategic silence for confusion. They interpreted your careful observation as hesitation. But you were doing something they couldn't comprehend. You were studying them like a scientist studies bacteria under a microscope, cataloging every weakness, noting every pattern, memorizing every tell. While they were busy talking, you were listening. While they were busy showing off, you were learning. While they were busy celebrating their perceived dominance, you were building a complete psychological profile of every single one of them. You knew how they thought before they thought it. You could predict their moves before they made them. You understood their motivations better than they understood themselves. And all of this knowledge, all of this insight, all of this devastating awareness, you kept hidden behind that smile. That patient, understanding, completely disarming smile that made them feel safe while you were constructing their downfall, piece by piece, move by move, breath by breath. They made jokes about you, didn't they? Behind your back they laughed. To your face they patronized. They treated you like a child who'd stumbled into an adult conversation. They explained things you already understood better than they ever would. They offered advice you'd already surpassed years ago, and you let them. You let them feel superior. You let them believe their own hype. You let them think they were the smartest person in the room while you were quietly becoming the most dangerous. because you understood something they never would. Real power doesn't announce itself. True intelligence doesn't need validation. Actual mastery doesn't require an audience. You played dumb while getting smarter. You played weak while getting stronger. You played lost while mapping every single exit, entrance, and trapdoor in their entire operation. The beautiful irony is they thought they were teaching you the game, but you were teaching them a lesson they'd never forget. Every time they explained something condescendingly, you were learning their blind spots. Every time they underestimated your intelligence, you were cataloging their arrogance as a weakness to exploit later. Every time they dismissed your input, you were noting exactly which pieces of information they valued and which they ignored, giving you a perfect blueprint of where their defenses were strongest, and more importantly, where they were laughably weak. You turned their ego into your weapon. You transformed their pride into your ammunition. You weaponized their certainty that they were better than you, and that weapon would eventually destroy them completely. And here's what really gets them, what really keeps them up at night trying to figure out where it all went wrong. You were never playing their game. You were never following their rules. You were never even on their board. While they thought you were struggling to keep up, you were building an entirely new game they didn't even know existed. While they were celebrating winning battles, you were ending the war. While they were focused on capturing your pieces, you'd already captured something far more valuable. Their trust, their confidence, their complete and utter certainty that they knew who you were. And when you finally made your move, when you finally showed them what you'd been building this entire time, the shock on their faces was worth every second of being underestimated. The confusion in their eyes when they realized they'd been playing checkers against someone who'd been orchestrating a military campaign was the sweetest victory you'd ever tasted. Let's talk about what was happening behind that smile, shall we? Because while your face showed kindness, your mind was running calculations that would make quantum computers jealous. Every conversation was data collection. Every interaction was reconnaissance. Every seemingly casual question was strategic intelligence gathering, disguised as friendly curiosity. They thought you were making small talk, but you were building psychological dossiers. They thought you were being polite, but you were identifying pressure points. They thought you were just naturally curious, but you were mapping their entire mental architecture, finding every crack, every weakness, every point of structural failure that you could exploit when the time was right. You listened to their stories and learned their fears. You watched their reactions and discovered their triggers. You noted who they respected, who they dismissed, who they loved, who they hated, and most importantly, who they underestimated. Besides you, you cataloged their speech patterns to predict their thinking patterns. You studied their body language to understand their unspoken truths. You paid attention to what they didn't say, because the silences told you more than their words ever could. And all of this information, this massive database of human behavior and psychological vulnerability, you processed in real time while maintaining that gentle, harmless, absolutely devastating smile that kept them completely off guard. They never suspected a thing, because you'd mastered the art of looking exactly how they wanted you to look. When they needed someone soft, you appeared soft. When they needed someone confused, you appeared confused. When they needed someone to dismiss, you gave them every reason to dismiss you. You became a mirror reflecting back exactly what would make them most comfortable, most confident, most catastrophically wrong about who they were dealing with. You studied their egos like a mechanic studies an engine, learning exactly which parts needed stroking, which needed challenging, which needed ignoring to keep the machine running exactly how you needed it to run. And here's the genius of your approach. You never once lied. You never once pretended to be something you weren't. You simply allowed them to make assumptions while you strategically chose which parts of yourself to reveal and which to keep hidden. You let them see your kindness, but not your strategy. You showed them your patience, but not your calculation. You displayed your gentleness, but concealed your ruthlessness. You were always exactly who you were, but you controlled the narrative of their perception so masterfully, they thought they knew you when they'd only seen the tip of an iceberg that could sink their entire fleet. The calculation never stopped. Even in moments of genuine connection, even in times of real vulnerability, even when you actually cared about them, there was always a part of your mind running the numbers, adjusting the strategy, preparing for contingencies, not because you're cold, but because you learn the hard way that the world doesn't reward naivety. You learn that kindness without awareness is weak. You learned that trust without verification is stupidity. So you became someone who could be genuinely warm while simultaneously being strategically brilliant. Someone who could care about people while also being prepared for them to betray you. Someone who could smile with real affection while keeping 3 backup plans in your pocket, just in case that affection wasn't returned with equal loyalty. Now we arrive at the beautiful part. The moment when all that patience, all that observation, all that strategic silence starts paying dividends they never saw coming. You'd been building this trap for months, maybe years, and they walked into it thinking it was a garden party. Every piece was positioned perfectly. Every escape route was covered. Every contingency was planned for. And they had absolutely no idea they were already captured, already defeated, already finished. They were still making moves thinking they were winning while you'd already declared checkmate 3 different ways they hadn't noticed yet. You gave them exactly what they wanted. If they needed to feel superior, you gave them opportunities to feel superior. If they needed to feel intelligent, you asked questions that let them explain things. If they needed to feel powerful, you showed deference that fed their ego until it was so bloated they could barely see past it. You turned their desires into chains. You transformed their needs into traps. You weaponized their hunger for validation and used it to lead them exactly where you needed them to be. And the entire time, that smile never wavered. That gentle, patient, absolutely lethal smile that said, "Keep going. You're doing exactly what I need you to do." The beauty of your trap is it didn't look like a trap. It looked like weakness. It looked like opportunity. It looked like an easy win. So they rushed in without checking for wires, without testing the ground, without questioning why someone who seemed so harmless was suddenly so accessible. They were so focused on what they thought they were taking from you that they never noticed what you were taking from them. Their time, their resources, their attention, their trust, their secrets, their power. You were redistributing everything they had while they were busy thinking they were exploiting you. You were dismantling their entire operation while they were celebrating what they thought was your downfall. And here's where your genius really shows. You didn't just trap them, you made them trap themselves. Every move they made to exploit you was actually a move that strengthened your position. Every attempt to manipulate you was actually them walking deeper into your manipulation. Every time they thought they were playing you, they were actually playing themselves. You turned their own strategy against them so completely they're still trying to figure out where their plan ended and yours began. You made them feel like puppet masters while you held every single string, and they pulled themselves into knots, thinking they were pulling yours. The timing was perfect because you'd been patient enough to wait for the exact right moment, not too early when they might still be cautious, not too late when they might have moved on. You waited until they were completely committed, completely invested, completely convinced of their superiority. You waited until their guard was at its lowest, because their confidence was at its highest. You waited until they'd bet everything on you being who they thought you were. And then, and only then, did you start showing them who you actually are. Not all at once. That would be too merciful. Slowly, gradually, with that same patient smile, you began revealing that the angel they thought they knew had always been playing chess while they were still trying to figure out which piece was the king. The moment they realized what you'd done, that moment when the pieces finally clicked into place and they understood they'd been outplayed from the very beginning, that's the moment they'll remember for the rest of their lives. You watched their faces shift from confusion to recognition to horror to respect to fear, all in the span of seconds. You saw the exact instant when their perception of you shattered and reformed into something they should have seen all along. You witnessed their reality cracking as they understood that every assumption they'd made was wrong. Every conclusion they'd drawn was manipulated. Every victory they'd celebrated was actually a step deeper into your strategy. They went back through every interaction in their minds, didn't they? Replaying conversations with new understanding, seeing the game within the game, recognizing the traps they'd walked into while thinking they were setting them. Every kind word you'd spoken suddenly had layers they hadn't considered. Every gentle suggestion suddenly looked like strategic positioning. Every moment of apparent vulnerability suddenly revealed itself as calculated exposure that got them exactly where you needed them. A 9, a kid, and all just results. All just makes. They're all just miss. They realized you hadn't been reacting to their moves, you'd been directing them. You hadn't been playing defense, you'd been conducting an orchestra. And every note they'd played, even the ones they thought were improvised, had been written in your score from the beginning. The questions started pouring out. How long were you planning this? Longer than you think. When did you know? Probably before you even introduced yourself. Was any of it real? The parts that mattered were, but you'll never know which parts those were. Why didn't I see this coming? Because you were too busy looking down at me to notice I was looking right through you. The interrogation in their eyes was desperate, trying to salvage some sense of control, some piece of ego, some shred of the narrative where they were still the intelligent ones and you were still the naive one they'd believed in. But that narrative was gone, burned, completely obliterated by the reality that they'd been intellectually and strategically dominated by someone they dismissed as harmless. And here's what breaks them beyond repair. You're not angry. You're not vindictive. You're not cruel about your victory. You're still smiling that same gentle smile, but now they understand what it means. Now they recognize it for what it always was, not kindness mistaken for weakness, but power wrapped in patience. You're not celebrating their defeat because you never saw this as a competition. To compete with them would require you to see them as equals, and you stopped seeing them that way the moment they underestimated you. You were never trying to beat them, you were teaching them a lesson about assumptions, about ego, about the danger of judging a player by their appearance rather than their performance. They want you to gloat. They're waiting for the villain monologue where you explain your brilliance and mock their stupidity. But you won't give them that either, because you understand something they never will. Real power doesn't need to announce itself. True victory doesn't require acknowledgement. Actual mastery speaks through results, not explanations. So you just smile, that devastating smile they finally understand, and you let the board speak for itself. Checkmate. Game over. Lesson learned. They really do. And the most terrifying part for them is knowing that if you could do this once, if you could orchestrate this entire operation while appearing harmless, what else have you done? What else are you capable of? What other games are you playing right now that they don't even know exist? Now, they can't look at anyone the same way. You've fundamentally altered how they perceive the world, because you shattered their confidence in their own judgment. Every person they meet now, they wonder, are they playing me like that? Every kind gesture they receive, they question the motivation.